Take a look at this strange landscape.
This is the dry lakebed of Lake Urmia.
Once the largest lake in the Middle East, now it's reduced to fragments of its former glory, and it's happening right now in real time. You see, for millions of years, this ancient lake has been a beacon of biodiversity and a lifeline for many communities. But in just 5 decades, over 90% of its water has vanished. This is the story of Lake Urmia, a cautionary tale that's becoming far too common. And as always, this is Ali, and welcome back to Urban Atlas. Now, why did I just say that this story is becoming far too common? This may remind you of something quite similar that's happened in a location not too far away. I'm sure you've heard of the Aerrol Sea. Before we dive into Lake Urmia's story, we need to talk about the Aerrol Sea, another ecological catastrophe that serves as both a warning and parallel to Lake Urmia's story. Once the 4th largest lake in the world, the Aerrol Sea straddled the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. In the 1960s, Soviet planners diverted 2 rivers feeding the Aerrol Sea to irrigate cotton fields in the nearby desert. What followed was one of the most dramatic environmental disasters in human history. You see, by 2014, the eastern basin of the Aerrol Sea had completely dried up. Ships now rust in deserts that were once lake bottoms. Many fishing villages that relied on the Aerrol Sea for their survival sit miles away from any water. The exposed lakebed releases toxic dust storms laced with pesticides, causing respiratory illnesses and cancers in local populations. The Aerrol Sea has lost 90% of its volume. Salinity levels have skyrocketed in the remaining water, killing all 20 native fish species. The regional climate has also changed, making winters colder and summers hotter. The disaster displaced entire communities and destroyed an economy built on fishing. Now look at Lake Urmia. The patterns here are hauntingly familiar. The timeline is compressed, but the trajectory is still the same. Both lakes are terminal, meaning they have no outlet to the ocean. Both rely entirely on rivers and rainfall, and both sit in arid regions where agriculture demands enormous amounts of water, and both were sacrificed at the altar for industrial agriculture. Now, to better understand what's at stake here, we need to understand what Lake Urmia is and how it came to be. You see, Lake Urmia sits in northwestern Iran, cradled between the provinces of East Azerbaijan and West Azerbaijan. It rests in a tectonic depression at an elevation of 1,270 meters above sea level. It's surrounded by mountains that rise over 3,000 meters. Now, when we talk about the physical geography, this is actually a remarkable place. At its historical maximum extent, Lake Urmia covered approximately 5,200 square kilometers. To put that into perspective, that's about 90 times larger than Manhattan. It stretched about 140 kilometers from north to south, and 55 kilometers from east to west at its widest point. The lake is embraced by dramatic geography on all sides. To the west rise the rugged highlands of the Kurdish mountains, reaching elevations of over 3,000 meters, while to the east stands the volcanic cone of Mount Shahand, a dormant but imposing 3,700-meter volcano. The peak often snow-capped even in the summer. To the south lies the northern extent of the Zagros mountain range, the massive chain running the length of western Iran. Lake Urmia's drainage basin covers approximately 51,000 square kilometers. It collects water from a vast network of rivers and streams flowing down from the surrounding mountains. Climatically, Lake Urmia sits in a semi-arid to arid zone. The region receives between 200 to 400 millimeters of precipitation annually, with most falling as snow in the mountains during winter. Summers are of course hot and dry, with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. However, winters can get quite cold. with the lake historically freezing over partially during harsh winters. And the basin itself is relatively shallow. At its historical levels, the maximum depth was only about 16 meters deep, with an average depth of only 6 meters. This shallowness is crucial to understanding the lake's vulnerability. A small decrease in water volume translates to a large decrease in surface area, rapidly exposing vast stretches of lakebed. This fascinating lake has always been dynamic, naturally fluctuating by 1 to 2 meters annually based on seasonal precipitation patterns. Spring usually brings in a lot of water from snowmelt, while the higher evaporation rates in summer lower the lake's levels. This rhythm was quite predictable, and the ecosystem, well, it adapted to it over the course of millennia. Another thing that makes Lake Urmia quite special is that it's one of the oldest lakes on Earth. Geological evidence suggests that variations of this lake have existed for at least 5 million years, making it one of the oldest permanent hypersaline lakes on Earth. It survived ice ages, climate shifts, and the rise and fall of empires. The lake has historically been fed by 13 permanent rivers and more than 60 seasonal streams, with the Zarani and Semene rivers being the two largest contributors. The ecology of this lake is pretty special. That's because this lake supports massive populations of a species of brine shrimp found nowhere else on Earth. They also are the foundation of the lake's ecosystem, feeding millions of migratory birds. Speaking of birds, Lake Urmia sits along the corridor of the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Central Asian bird migration route. Each year, millions of birds, including flamingos, pelicans, egrets, and ducks, stop here to feed on the brine shrimp. The lake's many islands provide crucial nesting grounds for these species. Recognizing its importance, UNESCO designated Lake Urmia a biosphere reserve back in 1976. Despite its recognition, the future of Lake Urmia, like the Aerrol Sea, is uncertain. You see, back in the 1960s, Lake Urmia was stable at roughly 5,200 square kilometers with a depth of about 16 meters. But by 1995, that had dropped to 4,000 square kilometers, and by 2013, it was down to about 1,000 square kilometers. The water level fell by over 7 meters during this time. The primary culprit? Dams. Beginning in the 1960s and accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, Iran constructed over 40 dams on the rivers feeding Lake Urmia. The Shahid Kalantari Causeway, completed in 2008, also bisected the lake, disrupting water circulation. In addition to energy, these dams also served agriculture. The regions around Lake Urmia, particularly the provinces of East and West Azerbaijan, are major agriculture producers. So water that once flowed into the lake was now diverted into agricultural fields. But it wasn't just surface water. Farmers drilled tens of thousands of illegal wells, pumping groundwater at unsustainable rates. And the recent trend of rising temperatures in the region have compounded this problem. Iran has experienced rising temperatures and decreased precipitation over the past several decades. Snowpack in the mountains have decreased, meaning it has less meltwater in the spring. Droughts have become more frequent and more severe. Meanwhile, the population in the basin grew from about 6 million back in 1996 to over 7.5 million by 2016. More people meant more water demand for drinking, sanitation, and industry. And as you compound these challenges, well, what that means is the results are catastrophic. As the lake shrank, salinity increased beyond even extremophile tolerance. The brine shrimp population crashed. Islands became peninsulas, and that exposed lakebed, covering over 4,000 square kilometers, began generating salt storms. Now, these salt storms carry sodium chloride, calcium chloride, and other salts into the air. They damage agricultural lands, ironically destroying the very crops that consume the lake's water. They cause respiratory problems in nearby cities like Tabriz and Urmia, with reported increases in eye, skin, and breathing disorders. The decline of Lake Urmia has also impacted the nearby climate. You see, without the lake's moderating influence, winters become harsher and summers have become hotter. The lake had acted as a climate buffer. And now that buffer, well, it's gone. To make matters worse, economically, the lake's death has devastated tourism in the region, and the fishing industry has declined significantly. many of the jobs in these industries have disappeared.
Despite being an environmental crisis, this is also a social crisis.
Because Lake Urmia has been historically significant for the nearby settlements and communities for millennia. Because evidence of settlement around Lake Urmia dates back to the Neolithic period. The region was part of the ancient kingdoms, including the Monera, Unartu, and the later Median and Persian empires. This was a crossroads of civilizations when trade routes connected Mesopotamia to the Caspian and Anatolia. For centuries, people of these empires lived around the lake in relative harmony. They fished its waters, harvested salt from its shores, and used the lake for transportation. Lake Urmia supported not just ecological diversity, but cultural diversity. Azerbaijanis, Kurds, Armenians, and Assyrians all made their homes around its shores, each community adapting to the lake's seasonal rhythms. The ebbs and flows of water levels was natural, expected, and manageable. The lake is also important from a religious perspective. Many islands on the lake hold religious significance. Shahi Island contains the remains of a Zoroastrian fire temple, while other islands housed Christian monasteries in its medieval period. The lake was more than just water, it was sacred geography.
So, what does the future hold for Lake Urmia? And is there any chance the lake could return to its former glory?
By 2013, this crisis could no longer be ignored by the Iranian government. Under domestic and international pressure, they launched the Lake Urmia Restoration Program, one of the most ambitious ecological restoration projects in the Middle East. The plan was simple. First, reduce water extraction from the tributaries by 40%. Second, improve agricultural water efficiency through modern irrigation systems. Thirdly, buy back water rights from farmers. And finally, transfer water from nearby basins into Lake Urmia. By 2015, they also opened sections of the causeway, creating channels that allowed water to flow between the northern and southern basins, improving circulation and preventing the lake from splitting entirely. Now, has this plan worked? Well, that remains to be seen. As of right now, the future of Lake Urmia isn't looking so good. Many experts already claim that Lake Urmia is dead and that there's no hope for recovery. In fact, local reports go as far as to claim that Lake Urmia has completely dried up as of September of 2025. If this is the case, the consequences are expected to be catastrophic. Researchers claim that if this drying up of Lake Urmia is in fact permanent, approximately 6 to 15 million people could be at risk of environmental migration, primarily due to agricultural collapse and the frequency and intensity of salt storms. Sadly, Lake Urmia is not alone. Across the planet, we're witnessing systematic destruction of ancient water systems. The Aerrol Sea, the Dead Sea, Lake Chad, the Great Salt Lake in Utah, all are shrinking to historic lows. And these aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a fundamental relationship we've developed with Earth extraction without replenishment, consumption without consideration, and short-term gain prioritized over long-term sustainability. For millions of years, Lake Urmia existed through ice ages and warming periods, through the rise and fall of species, and through the entire span of human history, from our emergence to our dominance. The lake was always there. And in just 50 years, humans have potentially destroyed this lake forever. I want you to take a minute to think about what that really means. A single generation witnessed the destruction of a geological feature that survived millennia. We altered in decades what nature built in eons. Of course, humans did not do it through malice, but through short-sightedness. And the craziest part of all this is, we don't seem to learn from our mistakes. We're not prioritizing long-term sustainability over short-term needs. Humans seem to treat resources as systems that are infinite, as expendable, as resources that need to be exploited rather than the relationship that needs to be maintained. Lake Urmia teaches us that nature is resilient, but not infinitely so. The ecological systems have breaking points. Every lake we drain, every forest we clear, and every species we drive to extinction diminishes not just the planet, but in a strange way ourselves. We are not separate from these systems, we're part of them. When we poison the water, we poison ourselves. When we destroy the soil, we destroy our future. Unfortunately, Lake Urmia may never return to its former glory, but in it is a lesson for our future. The final question, though, is whether or not humans will learn from this lesson. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching my videos. If you like content like this, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Most of my viewers are still not subscribed, so do me a favor, and if you like content like this, hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.